Getting you caught up on all of the New Orleans Saints news from over the week and taking a look ahead to what the Saints still have to address before the 2021 NFL season kicks off. We've got a jam-packed episode on today's Locked On Saints.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast provider or watching over on YouTube, don't forget, we're here with you every single Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, covering your New Orleans Saints. On today's episode, in case you missed it, getting you caught up with all the big stories from around the New Orleans Saints this week. We'll start off with a look at a missed opportunity and reunion with a talented linebacker that the Saints invested in last season. And we'll also take a look at some preseason games that get their times and some 2022 salary cap clarity and much more as we kick off the show. Then we'll get into Facebook Friday and 5-Star Friday, giving a shout out to our 5-star reviewers, but also we'll get into our Facebook Friday question. Jeremy Silvka comes in with a great question, putting Cam Jordan under the microscope. If he has a subpar 2021, what could it mean for him and the team in 2022? Then we'll wrap up with our final part of our conversation with the New Orleans Advocate and Times-Picayune journalist Luke Johnson as we take a look ahead to 2021. What else do the New Orleans Saints have left to address? All that coming up for you on another episode today. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Deputy Brand Manager over at CanalStreetChronicles.com, and your Tuesday co-host over at the National Locked On NFL podcast. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints, your team every day. Now let's go ahead and kick off the show here. We'll start off with one of my favorite segments, In Case You Missed It. So in case you missed it, this is actually a news story, new-ish, happened yesterday, but the New Orleans Saints tried to put a waiver claim in on recently released or waived linebacker Joe Bachie to try to get him up off of waivers. He was signed by the New Orleans Saints as an undrafted free agent last season out of Michigan State after not being drafted in the 2020 NFL draft. So he was waived and claimed later on in the season by the Philadelphia Eagles, actually the week before the Saints and the Eagles played. He was claimed by the Bengals instead here, though. The Eagles ended up letting him go, and then the Bengals put in a waiver claim for him this offseason, this week. The New Orleans Saints and the Denver Broncos also had claims in on them, so linebackers still very much garnering attention from the New Orleans Saints, but they're sticking with young talent that they like, and they do very much like Joe Bachie, who's a bit of a tackling machine. But for right now, he just becomes yet another player to go from Louisiana in some capacity to Ohio, and hopefully maybe at some point he'll find his way from Ohio back to Louisiana, as the pipeline seems to run both ways between the two states and their football teams. Next, we'll go to the NFL salary cap. In case you missed it, the NFL salary cap for 2022 is set right now with a ceiling of $208.2 million. So that's $10 million up from last year's salary cap in 2019, where it was $198.2 million. Now, don't forget, the salary cap on average goes up about $10 million per year. So the original expectation for 2022 was for it to be somewhere around $218 million. So I wouldn't call it being back just yet, but certainly this helps out a lot of teams across the NFL, including the New Orleans Saints, who already have over $207 million invested in just 39 players with a couple of extensions sitting on their roster, at least let's say potential extensions sitting on their roster right now. If you look at their roster over at Over the Cap, you're going to see 43 players listed on the roster, but that includes 4 players who currently aren't technically on contract. They're just listed for dead cap or void contract, like voidable year reasons. So 39 players counting and amassing over $200 million for the Saints next season. We'll talk a little bit more about how the Saints can break that down, but you can get a preview of it over at Canal Street Chronicles with an article that I just posted today. And speaking of Canal Street Chronicles, my good friend and our good friend, we've had him here on the podcast a couple of times, Dylan Sanders, did 2 phenomenal interviews over the last couple of weeks. Peyton Turner, first-round selection for the New Orleans Saints out of Houston, and Dylan Sainer, the undrafted free agent tight end out of Iowa State. Here's a quick sneak peek at one of those interviews. It's going to be with Peyton Turner, but to see the rest of them, I'll tell you where to get it here in just a moment.
I have to say about the Saints fans that maybe doubted the selection as soon as it happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna happen. It happens with every pick.
Mm-hmm.
And the draft's crazy. You don't know who's gonna end up where. And I mean, really, if you don't, I mean, I wouldn't want anything different. You want to
Mm-hmm.
pass the fan base. So,
Oh well, you've
otherwise,
definitely got one.
yeah. I mean, you don't want to play somewhere where the fans aren't passionate. So I mean, I'm blessed to be in that situation here in New Orleans, just with like passionate fans and everything. But I mean, it's gonna happen with every pick. I know I was a little bit under the radar for at least for like the mock draft people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe probably not NFL teams, but I mean it's gonna happen. I just hope that I mean I'm gonna work to live up to that hype, live up to that expectation that these coaches got from me, that the front office got from me. So and then what the fans got from me. So I'm just trying to help bring a Super Bowl back to New Orleans.
Really phenomenal stuff by Dylan, who does a great job as an interviewer. I mean, he goes in depth, gets a lot of information before he walks into the interviews, and then mines for great information in the interviews. He's a phenomenal interviewer. So go and check him out. You can see the rest of that interview as well as the Dylan Sainer interview by Dylan Sanders over at the Canal Street Chronicles YouTube page, or you can check out Dylan's Twitter account at Dilly Sanders on Twitter. All right, so now let's look at the last 2 points here in case you missed it, getting you caught up for the rest of the week or from what has already happened in the week. In case you missed it, about 87% of New Orleans Saints players were expected at Saints camp, and that seemed to be exactly what it was that the New Orleans Saints were expecting as an organization and coaching staff as well. Its focus has been in the classroom, in the weight room, and on conditioning, not really 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 drills. Some compromise there for a team that had players that said that they were not interested or willing to participate in voluntary offseason activities in such a way that would potentially put them at risk, right? At risk of harm. So with that, the Saints, amongst several other organizations across the NFL, making some adjustments to their OTA schedule. And now you get a variety, and let me say a majority rather, into your facility ready and working during the OTA period. And according to Nick Underhill, something that he mentioned here recently, Pete Werner already standing out among the Saints rookies and among the Saints roster. And finally, in case you missed it, preseason games 1 and 2, remember only 3 preseason games this season. Preseason games 1 and 2 now have official dates and times all set. Saturday, August 14th at the Ravens will be 6 p.m. Central Time, and August 23rd versus the Jaguars will be at 7 p.m. Central Time. That one was already on the books, but that's 2 out of the 3 still awaiting determination for the time for the Week 3 game against the Arizona Cardinals, but expect that to be on the way here fairly soon. All right, y'all, coming up next, we're jumping into 5-Star and Facebook Friday. What happens if Cam Jordan has a down season in 2021, and what could that mean for the team and player heading in to 2022? This is a player that is synonymous with the New Orleans Saints franchise. Could there potentially be a split there? I'll tell you why I think it's unlikely as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I wouldn't bet any amount of money on Cam Jordan not being a New Orleans Saint in 2022. But there are some things that I've already participated in over at betonline.ag because they have an expansive catalog of bets, props, everything that you can get involved in. I'm not about sitting on the sideline. I'm ready to get in on the game, get some skin in the game, and BetOnline allows me to do that, and they'll allow you to do that too, especially if you're a college football fan, because they have win totals for a bunch of teams across college football that you can go ahead and bet on as well. So if you want to get in on that action, head over to betonline.ag. Accounts are free to sign up for, and all you have to do is put a little bit of money down so that you can begin betting. And when you do that, I'm going to let you get a little bit of free play in there as well. A 50% welcome bonus for your very first deposit. So on your first deposit, 50% welcome bonus with the promo code LOCKED ON. LOCKEDON, all one word, all caps. I don't even know if it gives you the opportunity to do lowercase, but just in case, all caps, LOCKEDON, to get that 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Who Dat Nation, it is Facebook Friday and it is 5-Star Friday, so we're going to get started here talking a little bit about Cam Jordan. Could 2021 end up being Cam Jordan's last year if he underperforms? I think it's unlikely. I'm going to tell you why in just a moment, but remember, at the end of the episode here, we're also going to be joined again and looking at our final part of my conversation with Luke Johnson as we talk about what the Saints still need to do ahead of the 2021 NFL season. But first, I want to get to our 5-Star Friday. We always give shout outs to the folks that take the time to leave 5-star reviews over on Apple Podcasts on Fridays. So I want to give a shout out to Daniel Dawson, who left a great review talking about the Ross cast. I appreciate you very much for coming through. Best Saints podcast, 5 stars. Appreciate you so much for taking the time to do that. And another review here from ADWDA 11, who came through with an update. Still the best podcast out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really, really appreciate everybody for taking the time to support the show and appreciate those 5-star reviews. And I will always try to make sure that I remember to shout folks out on Fridays who take the time. I'll find something to do over on YouTube as well. Like leave me your best dad joke in the comments and I'll share it or something like that. I like dad jokes. I'm a big fan of dad jokes. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the business here. Sorry, I'm just having a little bit of fun, but let's get into a little bit of the business here. Jeremy Silvka from over at the Locked On Saints Facebook group, which you can join at facebook.com/groups/Locked On Saints. It's the place that I go to and I'm like, hey, any requests, any content ideas, stuff like that people want to hear. And then, of course, gathering questions that I could talk about on the show. And Jeremy came through with a big one that I actually want to dedicate an entire segment to because I think it's an interesting topic. Basically, the question in short form here is, if Cam Jordan were to have a subpar year, what could that mean for his future with the New Orleans Saints? Could the Saints potentially move on from him? And he also acknowledges that, Cam Jordan's kind of a face of the franchise and things like that. But is there a point where business becomes business? And that is always a valid question. And I commend Jeremy for looking at it that way because, yes, business is always going to be business. You know what I'm saying? So there's always the opportunity that something like that could happen. So first, let's define what a subpar year for Cam Jordan would have to look like based on his role as a strong side edge defender. So remember, we're talking about edge defender, not just edge rusher. So it's more than just sacks. It's more than just pressures, all those things. So his responsibilities, defend the run first and foremost, rush the passer, and then also draw attention of offensive linemen and potentially any tight ends or running backs that may also be helping over on the strong side to help to open up opportunities for other players on the defensive line. A little bit less of a responsibility, but something he's been very, very good at and something we expect to be a part of his game. So we can establish a baseline by looking at 2020, which would be considered a down year, especially after several seasons of double-digit sacks, coming in and having only 7.5 sacks in 2020. So we can consider this sort of a baseline where we can say above good, below subpar, perhaps. We'll talk a little bit more about that more in detail. But he was top 5 in both run stops and run stopping percentage amongst all defensive ends in the NFL that had 250 or more run defense snaps according to Pro Football Focus. So in terms of defending the run, check. You can check that box off. He did very well there. He was top 10 in generated total pressures, right? So that includes hurries, sacks, and hits all combined. So top 10 there, and also had 7.5 sacks on the season, 8 according to Pro Football Focus because they don't credit half sacks, if that makes sense. So he ends up with 7.5 sacks there, top 10 in total pressure. So I think you could say that he pressured and rushed the passer pretty effectively, even though he didn't get to the point of having 10.5 sacks. He just didn't live up to his own standard that he has set. And sometimes that can hurt, right? You overperform, or not even overperform. For him, it was performing at his standard, getting 15 sacks, getting 13 sacks, all the things he's done over the past few years. Sometimes if you don't live up to that, it's going to look a certain way. Now, also, when it comes to drawing the attention of other offensive linemen, he considerably generated opportunities for other players, including Trey Hendrickson, of course, who walked away with 13.5 sacks and a new shiny contract in Cincinnati this season. Cam Jordan continued to draw double teams, draw the attention of additional blockers, things like that, which opened up opportunities for other defensive linemen to be able to make plays. So I do think that he checked all 3 boxes in 2020, but the big question mark was the drop in sack production. Is that going to be something that's going to continue to drop? Or was that sort of I don't want to call it a misnomer, but was it sort of a anomaly for the 2020 season? That's really the word that I'm looking for. So anything less than that, right? Top 10 or top 5 rather in run stops and run stop percentage, top 10 in total pressure, 7.5 sacks. Anything less than that, would that be considered subpar? If so, if your answer is yes, then let's consider what a subpar season would then look like. Let's say outside of the top 15 when it comes to run stops as well as run stop percentage. The division of top 5 and top 10, getting outside in between like top 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, before you get to top 15 is still pretty slim. So I'm taking a larger division there to say if he drops out of the top 15. Same thing for the total pressure side. If he were to drop from top 10 to outside of the top 20, keep in mind that the separation between within the top 10 and getting to number 20 is only 7 total pressures altogether. So that's why I say outside the top 20, because actually dropping into the top 20 is pretty simple. And then having less than 5.5 sacks on the season. So that'd be -2.5, -2, depending upon how you count sacks. being from 2020. So you'd see a little bit of a drop in sack production there. And then if he's not drawing double teams, the attention from offensive linemen or additional blockers and creating opportunities for others, which is kind of hard to quantify, but it's an important element of his game for sure. So I think it's fair to say that if he dropped to any of those or all of those thresholds collectively, that you would be looking at what would be considered by Cam Jordan, who, remember, he sets his own standard, right, by his production and his past production and what he's done. If he were to drop to that level of production, then maybe you can consider that subpar by his definition. I think he certainly would consider it subpar when self-evaluating. He's always been critical and hard on himself. Even if that were to happen, it might be tough to move on from Cam Jordan at any point, specifically to just cut him, because then you run into a lot of dead money issues. Remember that looking at this leader of the defense, looking at him as a leader of the defense is also important, right? Because it's not just about the money. It's also about the camaraderie. It's about the community. It's about the culture of the team. You're also potentially looking that you could lose Malcolm Jenkins next season as well, who's a leader in the secondary. So you'd be losing a pair of really big emotional locker room leaders for your defense. So you could also lose Marshawn Lattimore, who's on a contract season. Marcus Williams is on a contract season. So you probably want to generate some pass rush if you're going to end up losing pieces in your secondary. But there's also the dollars, right? The dollars part of the conversation. Right now, the New Orleans Saints, remember, $207.6 million or so already committed in 2022 with a salary cap ceiling that will not exceed $208.2 million. Of that money, 22.7 right now, $1 million is Cam Jordan's cap hit in 2022, $13.6 million in base salary, which means he becomes a prime restructure candidate, just like you saw him do in March or early March of this past season. So he actually ends up saving you money if you keep him and restructure him. But that also means that you could save $14.5 million if you were to cut him, but designate him as a post-June 1 cut, so a June 2nd cut. That would help to defer the dead money, but it's still a considerable amount of dead money. $8 million in 2022, $13.2 million in 2023. So with all of that, is it impossible to move on from Cam Jordan if he has a subpar season? No. Would it be unreasonable if he truly, truly does have a subpar season? Not at all. But would it be inconvenient? Absolutely. And also, I don't think he's going to have a subpar season going into 2021. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think his 2021 is going to be better than his 2020. So I wouldn't see them rushing to move on from him unless he absolutely falls off a cliff, which I think is hard to see happening. I'm certainly hoping for more when it comes to Cam Jordan in 2021. And we're also hoping for more when it comes to the rookies on this team and this team as a whole, right? But what do they have left to do going into the 2021 season? We're going to wrap up our discussion with Luke Johnson at the New Orleans Advocate-Times Picayune on exactly that topic as we continue on and wrap up this week here at Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as we wrap up the week, don't go into the weekend hungry. Get yourself some Built Bars. That way you have something pre-workout, post-workout, in the morning, late in the afternoon to make sure you get that jolt of energy that you need without taking on a bunch of sugar and threatening yourself with a sugar crash later on down the line while you're already trying to rebound from your coffee crash, if you're like me. So absolutely go and check out our good friends over at Built Bar. 9 delicious, let me say it from a dude, deliciouser flavors that are out there right now, and the occasional limited time flavor as well. So I'm going to just read off a couple of flavors for you. Coconut almond, cherry and raspberry if you're a fan of chocolate and fruit. Mint brownies, my absolute favorite. Peanut butter brownies, an absolute classic that you can't miss out on. And a couple of others that are fantastic as well. And like I mentioned, some limited time flavors that also pass through. These are all covered in 100% chocolate. And you're looking at 4 or 5 grams of sugar, despite getting 17 or 18 grams of protein and only 4 or 5 grams of net carbs as well. So they do a phenomenal job managing these bars, making sure that you're getting something that tastes like a candy bar, but works like a protein bar. So to try them out yourself, head over to BuiltBar.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 to get 15% off over at BuiltBar.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Absolute pleasure to wrap up today's episode with the final part of my conversation with Luke Johnson from the New Orleans Advocate-Times Picayune as we take a look at the 2021 New Orleans Saints and what they have to do left before the season kicks off. As you look over what they addressed in the draft class, what they've done so far this offseason, a lot of local prospects coming in, reuniting with certain players. What are some of the things that still need to be done for this team as they head into, as they head into training camp before we look at the 2021 season?
Well, the most glaring one is corner. I mean, everybody knows it. The other 31 NFL teams, I'm sure, know it. And look, even if you're confident in Paulson and Debo, which I think they were both Mickey and Sean were very hesitant to pump them up, right? Mickey Loomis said, this is a developmental player who will need development. Yes. Even if you're super confident in him, the guy hasn't played football since November of 2019.
Right.
So, I mean, it is going to take him time to be a guy that you really can count on in all likelihood. There's a chance that he just comes in and steps in as he's a dude right away. Mm-hmm. But the more likely thing is that he's going to need some time to develop. Right. So, yeah, what else are you looking at there?
That's kind of it, right? Yeah.
You got Marshawn Lattimore.
Right.
Great. We still don't know what his legal situation, if it's going to involve any sort of suspension. Yeah, I think it'd be wrong to just assume one way or another on that.
Of course.
I think you can count on Patrick Robinson and PJ Williams in spots on the outside, especially. I don't think you can count on them for 17 games. I don't think you can count on Ken Crawley for 17 games out there. I think you can hope one of these guys that you signed, Keith Washington showed a lot of promise last year in training camp.
Right.
One of these undrafted guys might end up being just an absolute steal for him, but you don't want to just totally depend on that.
Right.
Hope that you hit on one of these guys going into the season. It's a huge glaring need for him right now. And I think they understand that. And I think the odds are, in my opinion, that they'll find a way to address it before the season, one way or another, whether it's getting an extension done for one of the three guys who needs an extension and signing a big name player like Richard Sherman who's still available, whether it's using some of the draft capital that they've amassed to trade and bring in a veteran. I think one way or another they'll address that position before camp. It's too important a position in the modern NFL to just go into it with it's going to be PJ, P-Rob, or one of these other guys that maybe will step up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think moving on down from there, I think they still need some defensive tackle depth. I really like Shai Tuttle and Malcolm Roach, and I think Jalen Dalton had a nice training camp last year. But you lost Sheldon Rankins and Malcolm Brown, and two guys who played, I think, a combined something like 700 snaps last year. That D-line depth is so crucial to what they do. I think I'd like to see him add a veteran there on a smaller contract.
Sure.
They're usually pretty good at scouting. Even one of the guys they cut last year, or it might have been 2 years ago, with Mario Edwards went on to sign a big deal with the Bears.
With the Bears, that's right. Yeah.
And just because they were so deep on the defensive line, they ended up cutting a really good player who had a really good year. I just think it's crucial that they continue to do that, because it's a huge part of why their defensive success was what it was.
Yeah.
And then maybe you could if somebody makes a cap cut between now and the start of the season, maybe you could add a wide receiver or something like that. But I think the defensive interior and corner, boundary corner, are the two biggest things in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, Luke, we always like to end on something fun here with Locked On Saints. And again, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to come through on the show. You and I, both big fans of Die Hard, one of the huge fans of Die Hard. And constantly in the Twitter interactions, we're always talking about it. So I have to ask, if you had the opportunity here, came through. See, this is why I love having the YouTube channel now, because we can appreciate all of this.
Here. Look at this. Oh my goodness.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, this is what came with my scale model of Nakatomi Plaza. Yes, I didn't even realize this was up here when we started talking. I'm glad it was.
Me too. All right, so if you had the chance to watch Die Hard with any three athletes over the history of over the history of sports, right? Over history, whether they be alive or beyond, what what 4 athletes would you choose to watch this film with?
Okay, so I think I'm going to break the rules just a little bit here.
Okay. All right.
So first up, I think Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
Because I've seen his pop culture takes.
Good call.
And I think he's also just like a very smart and witty guy. I think it'd be fun to get his take on Die Hard. Number 2 would be Charles Barkley.
Nice.
Just because like the personality is so large and out there that like when some of the more ridiculous things happen in the movie, I just want to see Chuck's reaction to it. Number 3, and this is the one like I put a lot of thought into this, and Dirk Nowitzki.
Okay.
I want to get the German reaction to Hans Gruber and the boys, and I want to maybe get like Dirk's like Hans Gruber impression. Maybe it's a lot better than mine. You know,
Sure.
Maybe tell me, because they don't have subtitles on for what they're saying in German a lot of times. I'm like,
right.
Hey, tell me what they're saying, man.
Yeah,
I think he'd be so clutch to watch that movie with.
Yeah.
All right, and the last one. This is the cheating one.
Okay.
It's not an athlete, but I would love to. I'd love to do like literally anything with Andy Reid. So, like, just maybe.
Phenomenal.
Like, have all the guys over, and they're like, "Who's the 4th, man?" And I'm like, "Oh, don't worry, it's Coach." And they're like, "Coach who?" And they just comes in with like a huge tray of cheeseburgers.
Just fantastic.
We maybe just don't even talk about the movie for a while. We talk about the burgers and what makes them so good. And yeah, I think that sounds like a great night. Me, Chuck, Dirk, and A-Rod.
Andy Reid definitely comes off as the type of guy you could have about a 40-minute conversation with about how long each side of the burger needs to be grilled.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he would be perfect for that.
Yeah. You can tell me about all the intricacies of the perfect burger, even like a perfect plain cheeseburger. I bet Andy Reid could make a perfect plain cheeseburger.
I have absolutely no doubt. And I have absolutely no doubt as well that I had a ton of fun with all of this. Thank you so much, Luke, for coming through. Once again, you can follow Luke on Twitter at @ByLukeJohnson. Check out all of the great work over at Times Picayune, The Advocate, New Orleans. We really appreciate you coming through, man, and thanks for taking the time.
Always, Ross. My pleasure, man. I'm looking forward to doing this again sometime.
And one more big thank you to Luke Johnson of the New Orleans Advocate, Times Picayune, for coming through. Once again, you can follow him on Twitter at @ByLukeJohnson. Phenomenal guy and a ton of fun, incredibly knowledgeable, and a fantastic writer, like impeccable writer. So go and check out all of his great work. He returns from vacation here soon, so he'll have a lot of stuff coming out for you. Now, as we get into the weekend here, remember, we will be back on Monday. It is Memorial Day, but I'm coming through no matter what. Monday through Friday here on the show as we continue in throughout the off season. We'll be back with our Monday mailbags. If you have questions, make sure you send them to me. You can drop them in the comments of this video if you're watching on YouTube. You can write them over to me on Twitter at RossJacksonNola, NOLA. Or, of course, you can join the Locked On Saints Facebook group and drop them there at facebook.com/groups/LockedOnSaints. As always, I appreciate everything that you're doing, watching, rating, reviewing, sharing, liking, commenting, everything you're doing to help grow this family. It means the absolute world to me, and I'm so grateful to be here with you every Monday through Friday. You can follow me on Twitter at RossJacksonNola. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them, and trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.